So I got my coffee. Oh my god, like I didn't have any line, like, which is magical. So I guess choose a day when it's crazy snow to go. But I have the soy latte with soy milk. I'm sorry. Okay, scratch that. Pistachio latte with soy milk. Pretty hot, almost burned my tongue, but yeah, so I'm gonna go home and we're gonna talk about books, the ones that I read in January of 2021. See you in a few. Hello, here back again with my coffee, this time in a little warmer environment where we're not snowed up, you know, and stuff. So I decided to do a roundup of my books that I read in January of 2021. I definitely kind of tried to pay attention more to the quality rather than the quantity as I have before, kind of like trying to like knock out a bunch of books, not really caring if I really enjoyed the book, and not taking a moment to actually like pay attention to the book, feel it out, go more in depth in the book. So I did take my time. Surprisingly, I also saw and kind of realized and unintentionally read a lot of 2021 books that had just come out at the beginning of the year. 3 of them were part of the book of the month monthly membership. I did order only 1, but the other 2 I got at the library. It also kind of like was a little bit stressful because I had placed a lot of holds at the library for ebooks. I finally figured out how to, probably the last person on earth to like realize how to do it. So I figured out how to do it, and I was like number like 60 or something, or like number like 12 in a hold, and I thought like, okay, it'll be like 4 weeks, because it was like estimated, like it says like 4 weeks, 5 weeks, and then all of a sudden like 2 or 3 books kept coming at a time, and I was just like trying to like knock them all out. I think I had to delay a couple books because I just like couldn't keep up anymore. So yes, I just wanted to round up what I read. So the total number of books that I read this month are 15 books. It doesn't include 2 poetry books. I still count those as books because they are trackable on Goodreads as books. I did read 3 nonfiction books, which I'm really happy because I'm not really into nonfiction, but I've been trying to like push more into it. So I read 3 nonfiction books, the 2 poems that I mentioned. I read, so 4 of them were historical fiction, and one of the historical fiction was also a Western, which was my first Western that I read, and I actually really enjoyed it. And then I decided to also pick up Blake Crouch's other book that I've been meaning to read called Recursion. It's a science fiction book, definitely similar like style as Dark Matter, but a little bit different. And then 3 of the books were horror thriller. So my absolute favorite that I did a separate review on, the Sun Down Motel, that was absolutely probably the favorite of the month for me. So I track all my books in a spreadsheet just so like I could keep up and kind of like see how many like statistics I have, like how many pages I read, what authors, the publisher. I mean, it's just basically kind of for me because Goodreads doesn't always track like the publisher or the gender of the author that you are reading. It doesn't also track the genre that you're reading, which you could shelf on your own, but for that particular year it does not track exactly. And I know like a lot of the books can fall under the category of like a couple genres, so I have like columns that depict like, you know, a couple columns so that I have a variety of genres that they fall under. So let me get started with the first book. I'm gonna like kind of like go through it. I'm gonna try to like sum it up. Don't really want to talk about what the books are, but I just want to exactly talk about why I liked each book and what my review and what my star review was for each book. But first, let's drink some coffee. Okay, so the first book, it was a short book, perfect to start off 2021 or any year. I read Congratulations, by the way, by George Saunders. It is the speech that he gave at Syracuse University. Really popular, talks about kindness, so it was like a great start to the year, and which is really great to read at this time because, you know, we're kind of stuck in a pandemic and people aren't like always so kind, you know, these days with everything else going on. So it was kind of like really great to take it all in, and I hope part of my review was that I hope once everything reopens and people like are gathering back again together, that we remember to be kind to one another. So the second book that I read was Stitching a Life, an immigration story, and the author is Mary Helen Fain. So the reason I picked up this book is because it is about a girl and her family that are immigrating from Lithuania, where I am from. She's of Jewish descent, so they're trying to, you know, like escape what the repressions that they had against them and just to like live a better life in the United States. So it kind of follows her life, like how she gets on a boat, how they have to work hard to make money for the rest of the family to come, and then once they eventually come together, how their lives just like go on, like how they have to work hard in the factories and make the clothing, and then how the character falls in love. You know, it's just like a really sweet story. In my opinion, I really liked it. I did give it like only the 3 stars, only because I felt like it was just like too good to be true. Like you know, like they were talking about like working hard, but you never like felt the struggle in the book, and I feel like that's really important to actually feel like it to be more realistic, because the way that it was written, it was kind of like a little bit like not realistic, because when you move all the way across like the, you know, the Atlantic Ocean, like it was, because, you know, it was definitely hard back in those days to establish yourself. So I did feel like there was like a reality missing, I guess, like because it was just written as like a fiction format book, the author decided to dismiss all of the hard parts, even like the stuff that did happen that was difficult, like her brother got hurt, like attacked. It wasn't like really, like I didn't feel like some sort of like panic in me for the character's life, because I'm like, oh, I know that he's gonna survive in this story. So but overall I love the story. Definitely like a lot of people like from Lithuania traveled during those times to the United States, and a lot of experiences that I've heard of and known of from friends and their families. So it was a really great read. So I definitely recommend that book if you do want to read a little bit more about somebody's immigration story, if you haven't like heard about it or read about it. Yeah. The third book that I read was my absolute favorite. I already did a separate review for it. It's The Sun Down Motel by Simone St. James. I gave it 5 stars. If I could give it 10, I totally would. Absolutely loved it. I was actually like panicking for the characters the whole time. Everything felt so real. Like I actually felt like I stayed at the Sun Down Motel. And again, this book is set in New York, just like Stitching a Life. So a lot of like this month, a lot of the books that I read were set in New York, and it was kind of an intentional how I picked them. But I really love to travel through books, and I was actually starting to track the location and the setting of each book so that I know. So my goal is to travel the entire world by reading books. So if you would like to listen to my full review and more in depth of the Sun Down Motel, definitely check out my video. I will link it below. Yeah, just my top favorite book, and it was only the 3rd book that I read this month, but my overall top book of the month, and probably is going to be my top in the whole entire year. And then the 4th one that I read was the poem book. It was by Lana Del Rey, Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass. I actually did not know that she released a book of poems. I'm not really good about like reviewing poems. I have not really reviewed any poems yet, because it's kind of like a little bit hard to like sometimes understand and review a poem, because the way that they're written, it's mostly like the inner feelings and emotions of the writer. So you can't really, you know, like rate it. Like, how am I gonna rate it? Like, the word didn't rhyme or something. So you have to like kind of go into like a really deep analysis and know exactly what the author meant by writing it. But overall, I really liked how it was written. I felt like they could be all songs. Maybe she's planning to release them as songs, but the words were all like so beautiful and descriptive. Overall, I'm really definitely impressed with her poem book. And then the next book that I have read is called Black Book. I got this as part of my book of the month. I actually enjoyed it, but I definitely thought I was gonna enjoy it a lot more because it was like really highly rated all over Goodreads. I was really expecting a lot from it, and I guess what I have learned that when you expect a lot of something, it doesn't really work out. Like, you know, you don't really enjoy it as much because you have these high expectations. Again, this book is set in New York, so I only gave it 4 stars. Like, the whole story would probably be only 3 stars for me, but I gave 4 stars because it's a really important subject in the book. It touches racism in the workplace, and we know that it happens in the world these days. So that was like really important to hear it out, hear the story, learn about it. But the whole like storyline kind of felt like, I think maybe like I didn't really enjoy the character, like the main character. He was very like aggressive at times and like going off on his mother and like his friends and his girlfriend. But you kind of do have an understanding why, because, you know, he like holds all these feelings in for what happens to him. So I guess it's kind of like a form of release for him. But still, I kind of felt like he was like very angry like throughout the whole story. So yeah, and like a lot of the other characters were very like awkward too. Like I didn't like fully understand them. It kind of was like almost, yeah, I didn't really like all of the characters in the book, like, to be honest. They were all like kind of like really weird. They had very unique personalities. I guess that's what made the story like really interesting, and like, yeah, so overall I gave it 4 stars because I do think it is a very important story to read and learn about. I'm really glad that I had a chance to read it. Okay, and then the next book that I read was Recursion by Blake Crouch. So this book was definitely on my list since last year, since I read Dark Matter. I really wanted to read another one of his books. It's science fiction, very similar to Dark Matter in a way, because it kind of has a similar like setup. Like there's a situation that happens that includes a machine, and then like characters are traveling through like a time space, and then they have to figure out how to end it. So it's literally what happened in Dark Matter. There was also a machine involved. They were also traveling through like a time warp, time space thing, and then they had to figure out how to end it all. So that's what was here. It was like a different, obviously, situation. I did feel like towards the ending, it kind of started to drag a little bit, only because it started to get really repetitive, how they were like going back into the past and trying to redo it, and just like kept going and going and going. I mean, if I was the character like in the book traveling like that, I would just be like, I'm done, like this is too much. For a reader, it felt like it was a little bit too much because it just like kept getting repetitive. But then like I always like to think through like what would be a better option to write if this was too repetitive. And I didn't really feel like there could be another ending or another way to write it out because of the way that everything like was being repetitive. It came out into a conclusion, so you couldn't really speed it up. So I don't know if that made any sense, but I don't know. Yeah, like sometimes I just like to think through like, is there a way to make it shorter? Is there a way to stop making it so repetitive? But I guess that was the way that you had to write it, because if you didn't write it like that, it would just be like really choppy, or there wouldn't be that situation in that time that puts it all together. Another thing about Blake Crouch's Recursion, I know I'm like really going into it, but this was definitely one of my favorites of the month too. I like how Blake Crouch writes his books, and it kind of like all seems like super real. He talks a lot about memories and what they mean and how they happen. And like with the machine, you like have to go back into memory to travel back into it, but you can't go back into like an old memory from a previous timeline or something because it's like a dead memory. There was just like so much science that goes into memories that like makes you really think about it, and I was actually like sitting here thinking, oh, I need to take like a course in this because it's just like way too interesting and so much going on out there that we really don't know about memories and how they function and what they are, you know? Sometimes like you do sit here and you think, did it really happen? Did it not? Like sometimes it feels like a memory. You almost like make it up, you know? Like deja vu, how like you feel it, you know? And that could be like from like the past life that they were all in, and it's like, oh wait, I was here. So I know we experienced that too. So in a way I feel like there is some like, I don't know, it just seems so real, and I always sit here after reading a Blake Crouch book thinking this is totally real. This could be happening. This book definitely, I really recommend to read Blake Crouch Recursion. It's really thought-provoking. You're really gonna like be thinking about it. But make sure you pick up like a little bit of a lighter read after, or take some time and put down the book after reading it, because your brain, kind of like mine, was a little bit fried from all the info that I learned. It felt like I was time traveling myself. The only thing I didn't really like in the book is the way that it ended. Once again, it didn't really have an ending, so the reader has to make it up on their own, so we don't really know what happens with Barry and Helena. I guess it's up to us to figure out. And you know, like I said previous, I'm not really a fan of those kind of endings. I wish we had like a full ending to know how they move on, but what can you do? I guess just make up your own ending. And let's take a coffee break. We've been talking a lot, reading a lot, so time for coffee. Okay, so the next book that I read was Mexican Gothic. I actually had it part of my book of the month since last year. I think it was the June book of the month for 2020. I didn't end up reading it until this year. And I'm really happy that I did read it, because you know how like you have all these books and you start pushing them away because new ones keep coming out. So I really prioritized this book. It's not like super long, so it was like a really quick read. It was like a horror but borderline like fantasy, because it like towards the end it was like some crazy stuff that was like really weird, like out of this world, but it definitely was like super interesting. The book is written by Silvia Moreno Garcia, and it is set in Mexico, so it was definitely fun to travel to Mexico through the book. Based in a castle, like, or a mansion. Gave me like the Haunting of Hill House vibes kind of in the beginning, when they were talking about like creaky floors, hearing sounds, seeing things and stuff. Kind of gave me those vibes, like your typical, you know, haunted mansion kind of story. But then there was like a turning point that totally changed it all. There was like kind of a slow buildup in the book, and a lot of the reviews also said that about the book, because you know, when there's like a slow paced build-up, you kind of like get bored by the time like you reach that midpoint. But here I would say it kind of worked out. I'm not like upset about it. I actually really enjoyed it, because if it was like any more faster, we would have lost it, like the whole story, and it would have felt like rushed. The reason why there was like a build-up was because of the dreams that Naomi started having. So we had to like experience all the dreams and like experiences that she was having before we actually got to the finale. So yeah, I would say the ending came at a right time, and I definitely was like really hard to put the book down by the time I reached like 100 pages left of the book. It started to really like unfold, and the conclusion started to come out. The weirdest thing was like the characters all seemed so bizarre. So throughout the entire book, I kind of felt like they were all gonna do something, like that they were all like super bad people, and something's gonna happen to her. Someone's gonna try to like murder her. But like I mean, I don't even know, I don't want to like give anything away what happened, but the characters are like super bizarre and like creepy throughout the whole story, even in the end. So if you do like slow burners that like the plot unfolds little by little, you like the settings in like mansions and stuff, I would definitely recommend this book to you. It has like a lot of like fantasy in it too. So it's kind of borderline like horror fantasy book, I would say. So the next book I read was The Only Plane in the Sky, an oral history of 9/11. I feel like this book is like really important to have in your reading list, and everybody should read it at least once in your life and have it. I mean, if at any time to read it, I would say this year is the year to read it, because it is 20 years since 9/11 happened. So it's kind of symbolic to like go back, remember everybody that like died that day and all the horrible stuff that unfolded. Of course, like I couldn't rate it any lower than 5 because you're not reading the story, you know? You just can't, because it happened, it's history, so there's no way to rate it. Unless like, the only reason I would say you would rate it any lower was if like the writing part really was bad. But I liked it. It was like in a format of like conversation, like the people were talking about their experiences and how they felt that day, what they saw, what happened, where they were. So it was really like frightening to read about the buildings collapsing, the Twin Towers, and all those people that were there and witnessed it, and those people that escaped that were so close to the floors that were impacted with the planes. The only thing I would say about this book is that I really wish we would have George Bush viewpoints in the book. I feel like that's what was missing, because all of the people like that worked on his team, like all the Secret Service, they were in the book. They were talking about like what they were experiencing, but I wish we would have the president in the book to talk about what he felt, you know, at that time when it happened, because it was so early into his term. So of course, like, you know, it is stressful. So I would say like definitely add this book to your reading list. It's like super important to have it on your reading list, especially this year because it's 20-year anniversary, so you just like kind of want to learn more about it. There's like movies and stuff, but this book is definitely worth it. It came out in 2019, so it's still sort of brand newish. So definitely recommend reading this book. So overall, for January 2021, I read a lot of books, like 15. So I did want to mention here in my spreadsheet how I've been tracking it. I write down all of the characters, and then I also write down the gender of the authors, and then I have like several little columns for the genre, because some of the books fall under 2, or I just want to keep track of the genre. And all of the books this year that I had read were all in 20, or like in the 20s. You know, there wasn't like any older books. I did have a goal to read a book from like a classical sense, but because of my library and how the books were coming through really fast, I didn't have time to change my reading, you know, my reading choices. So I did a little bit of math here, and I did read 7 books by a male author, 8 books by a female author, so kind of half and half. And then I did split it up by category, so a couple of the books I did list as more than one genre. So the most books that I read were historical fiction, so that's pretty cool. Yeah, non-fiction came a close second, and then horror. So Sun Down Motel wasn't really horror. I would say it was like more like mystery thriller. And Mexican Gothic wasn't really like a thriller. It was more like just straight up horror, like slash fantasy. So I would say like Mexican Gothic and Horror Story, they're kind of like also considered as fantasy. So I would just do like two for fantasy as well. And then the average year that I read of the books is 2019. So all books are pretty new. And then the average number of pages is 294. So yeah, quite average length of books. I didn't really want to read like books that were like super long, like a 700 pages long, but I know that's coming up for me. I'm definitely gonna have to dive into those kind of books soon.